Dr. Caroline Radcliffe, and I work at the University of Birmingham. And I'm standing in this wonderful mill at Belper. I'm here for the Discovery Day to talk to you about a project which should have been happening at this minute. And unfortunately, due to the COVID crisis, we've had to postpone it. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about it because we'll be back next year. We'll be doing workshops, clog dancing, we'll be talking about the sort of life that people had at the mills, and we'll be showing our 3-screen installation, The Machinery. You may be wondering why I'm dressed like this. And I'm dressed as a late 19th century textile worker, and my costume, which was beautifully made from the Ironbridge costume project, is a copy of an original textile worker's costume from a Lancashire mill. And as you can see, I've got lots of layers on, and although it was very hot work at the mills, the costume actually gave me a bit of support and a bit of help at standing at these machines for the whole of the day. At the beginning of the 19th century, I might have had to work between 14 and 16 hours a day, and it wasn't until factory regulations came in a little bit later in the century that they brought in bills like the 10-hour bill for children. Imagine that I had a family working here. If you look at the census records for a mill town like this, you can see that a woman's husband and whole family would be working is very much against the traditional idea of the Victorian lady who sits and does nothing, because the Victorian working woman was often the main wage earner. She would come into the mill probably at 6 a.m. in the morning, and all day long she would have one very repetitive task to do. And it was mainly children and women who worked on these floors. The men did the heavy jobs such as unloading the bales of cotton when they arrived and shifting things from place to place. But Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who visited the mills in the mid-19th century, pointed to the women and children as being more pliant and docile, and that was why they were picked for these very tiring, very strenuous jobs, just walking backwards and forwards at the machines for many hours a day. And this led to all sorts of illnesses. Probably I wouldn't have lived much beyond the age of 35. I certainly wouldn't be alive and working at the mill because it was a punishing type of labour. I'm just going to show you a little bit about my costume because it reflects things about my working day. I would probably only get half an hour for lunch out of a whole day of maybe 12 hours. So I've got my billy can here, I'd have some oats in it, or maybe some bread and butter, and I'd have a cup so that I could get water during the day. As I said, it was very, very hot at the mills, and one of the best forms of footwear that a working class person could wear are the clogs. And a clog was really cheap, economical type of footwear, because when the wooden sole wore out, walking backwards and forwards, you could simply replace it. So another thing that they did with clogs was to dance in them. And this is where my research comes in, because I learned to dance by a teacher called Pat Tracy, who was one of the most renowned clog dancers until she recently died in 2008. And she taught me a wonderful dance called the machinery, which I first learnt with the group Camden Clog. She always told me that the steps of the machines imitated the motion of the cotton machines. And each step had a name that reflected the different components of the machinery that you can see here at Belper. So for instance, a step like this one is called the pick, which was like the shuttle that flew backwards and forwards in the cotton making machinery, and it looked like this. So you can see my foot flying backwards like the shuttle. Another one which reflects the textiles is called the herringbone step, or simply the weaving step. And you might have seen this in more recent dances. And that weaves its way backwards and forwards. As the women and children were working, they'd have to move backwards and forwards. They were using their hands all the time, but sometimes they'd listen to the rhythms of the machines and they'd imitate them. So you can hear the rhythms in the steps. So one way of combating the incredible boredom and repetition of work at the mills was to do a sociable dance which you could share with other people. You could show steps, you could invent steps. It was very similar to the type of rap dancing and break dancing and hip hop that people do today. And it was a street dance essentially. It was something you might dance on the cellar flaps outside a pub, or you might just dance it on the cobbles outside. Sometimes you might have a wooden board in front of your machine, and that would make a good acoustic board to practice your steps on. So in 2018, we received Arts Council money to develop a film with the filmmaker John Harrison, myself, and the composer Sarah Anglis. And we created a 3-screen installation which you walk into. It gives you a feeling of what it was like to work in the mills because the noise was tremendous. We just recorded one of each machine from Quarry Paint Mill in style, but it still created a really loud soundscape. When you walk into it, you feel like you're surrounded by the machines. And we're going to be installing this in Belper and in Cromford next year, as soon as we're able to. So please keep an eye out. We'll be putting out some more videos and some information about the project. And I very much hope that I'll see you at the machinery in 2021.